Okay, today I'm in the A&P lab, Worcester State here, the Human Anatomy Lab, and I have here some bone models bone and skull models I want to show you. Typically, we would do this lab in person, but obviously, under our circumstances, we can't, so I just wanted to show you this stuff. You don't have to write up anything about it, but if you're interested, I'm just going to show you some stuff we have here. So this here is actually a bone model, a small kind of cross section of a bone. It shows all the different structures, and here you can see these canals where the blood vessels go. Those are the avversion canals, and you can see the spongy and compact bone. And you can see that also here. This is a real bone, real human bone. It's been sawed longitudinally. Now, remember in our discussion, we talked about saw marks, and you can kind of see them there. Yeah, you can see them there. So you could examine those and maybe match the saw. But here, we have our main shaft, and inside here is where the marrow would grow our red blood cells. And up here, we can see the spongy bone, good for absorbing impact. And you can see it's got that spongy shape, so it's very lightweight. This bone's very light. And then you get your compact bone down here to give it strength. And here we have a pelvis from a male and female. This one here is the female, and you can tell because the hip structure here, it's wide here in this pelvic opening. It has more of a U shape, where here you can see the V shape in the male. This right here is a V shape, less open. Again, the baby has to get through this area. So the pelvis here, or the sacrum here, is out of the way. So here in the male, you can see it curves in. So some bones can tell us sex. And here we have a couple of other skulls. Just to show you a difference between a male and female real quick, if you look at the jaw hinge here, it's nice and rounded. Well, here, it protrudes out. This is a male, this is a female. And usually I would show also the orbits, but these look very similar. So these could be actually two male tops. And sometimes, you could have square eye openings and be a female. It doesn't have to necessarily be one or the other. Also we have here is a fetal skull. This is fake. So we get the fake bones from a place called Bone Clones. And some of these other real bones are people who donated their bodies to science. So here we have our fetal skull. And we talked about the fontanelle, the soft spot. There's one here on top, and then there's a little one in the back. So the baby can pass through the birth canal. So the bones aren't all solidified. So you can look at the skull and look at the fontanelle and look at other features of the bones to determine age. But once you become an adult after puberty, it can be more difficult to pinpoint a specific age. There is a section here that basically is pubic symphysis that will fuse together last, basically, and you can look at this to determine maybe about anyone in their 20s, the age 20s. After that, it can be very difficult to ID age. I also have here some ancestors in a gorilla skull. So here's Neanderthal, who we talked about in class. You can see how large the skull is compared to our skull. The brow ridges also way more pronounced. Look at that compared to here. high forehead, low forehead, long sloping cranium, steep cranium. And here we have the opposite of that. So this be bigger than this, but this, oh wow, much tinier. Look at that. So this is what they call a hobbit. This is actually a skull found in Florence, Italy. May have been a cave dweller and only stood a couple feet tall, maybe 4 feet tall, most likely 3 feet tall. Very tiny. Here we have Lucy. And Lucy's one of the oldest skeletons. There might have been another discovery recently. Let's see, how old is Lucy here? 3.2 million years old. Also, a smaller skull was only maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. But she's considered one of the oldest skulls found. There was a little bit of a knee and femur bone as well found at her site. Here we have Australopithecus boisei. And typically they get their names based on maybe where they were found. And this is a humanoid ancestor. And I want to show this one just to show you. See this sagittal crest up here on the skull? Now, I usually ask this in class, what would this be used for? And if you look on a gorilla, you can see it has a very pronounced sagittal crest. And what it's for, jaw muscles. They all come up through here and attach. So this had a very strong biting pressure. Based on this crest, you could tell there's a lot of tendons being connected here that would come down to the jaw. So they're potentially biting something tough, whereas we don't really have that anymore. And here we have skulls of males from different areas of the world, from Australia, the Aboriginal natives. The skull's a little different shaped. You can almost see a little bit of leftover sagittal crest here. They show how their teeth, they don't have fluoride or dental. They're tribes people, so typically they don't have teeth for very long. And then we have here an Asian male. And if we were to look at the teeth, let's see here, here we have a casting of an Asian male's top row of the teeth here, and you can see this little scoop, kind of like pattern here on these teeth. That indicates potentially someone of Asian ancestry. Here we have a African male skull, and let's see here. For his teeth, you can see more of a U. There's no scoop compared to the. Flip around here. Only a little bit, but not as pronounced as this one. But if you compare it to the European male, you can see this has more of a V shape, and this tooth and this tooth are closer together compared to this one where it's more of a U shape and these teeth are actually wider set. So typically they might look at the teeth of an individual to try to identify maybe race if they find a skull. They don't have much to go by. Remember, dental records are a great way to potentially ID someone if there's a badly decomposed body. And here's just a little cross section of a jaw and our teeth. These aren't numbered like how they would for forensic. This is just to show you features. for a forensic setting. But, you know, you can look at the different shapes of the teeth. Remember, we talked about these are for grinding plant material. Here we have our canines and our incisors for slicing and tearing. And one of the things we would have done in our lab is determine sex. You can look at the different parts of the skull, how to determine race. You could also determine height. So what we would have done is we would have measured a femur and a humerus. Here we have our femur. This is a bone clone, so not real. In our humerus. And we would have used rulers and protractors, and you guys have all probably used those in the past, but something you might not have used is a caliper. And we'll use a caliper when we measure firearms and our blood spatter lab. So what this is, allows us to do is, you see it says outside here and inside. You can measure the distance, say, the opening of a jar by using the inside scale, or the width of the jar using the outside scale. So I don't have a jar around. Let's give, well, let's use this for an example. If I wanted to measure the inside space here, I can place my caliper inside here. And then I can measure that, and that says at the 0 about 30. Then if I wanted to measure the outside, say the back here, like this, I go to the outside, and then if we go to 0, that's about 60 millimeters. So you do the same thing for measuring different parts of the bone here, and you can actually measure the length of the femur. So you measure the length, you put it in centimeters, and then you add it to this formula. We talked about the regression formula really quickly. So basically, you measure your femur, where it says MLF, maximum length of the femur, you put that in centimeters, you times it by 2.3, add 65.53, and that is the height of your individual, potentially. It could be plus or minus 3.94 centimeters. So, this is basically telling you an average height and give or take a few centimeters. Now, about 4 centimeters. And then you would do it for a different race. So of Asian ancestry, you measure your length, you do this, and it would be a different number. And you would do it for, also for of African history, ancestry. And then you would do the same thing with your humerus, max length of the humerus, and then you would do it for these. How they came up with these formulas, I do not know. But you could basically come up with a minimum maximum of what each person could be. And you'd also have a regression formula. This is just for males of different races. Then you have to do it again for females of different races, for both the femur and the humerus. So, is it an exact science? No. You see, we get this confidence interval. There's, give or take, about 4 centimeters for males and or 4.5 here in the humerus, and then for females, it's about 3 centimeters for the humerus, and about, give or take, almost 4.5 with the humerus. Anyway, again, this is the bone box where I get all the bones from, and we actually have some over here that have real skeletons in them. We typically don't give those out to the just anybody. One last couple things I want to show you here. This is potentially a Viking skeleton It could be a Native American skeleton. This was found, well, I have a little snippet here. Found about 1900 in Swansea, Mass, in an area where many Indian, it should be Native American, artifacts occurred. This is also near where the Viking skeleton and armor was found. Very cool. The skull was in the Swansea Public Library till about 1935, when it was given to Anthony Thurston. He then donated this skull in 1976, and it's been here ever since. There's a little bit of varnish or lacquer kind of coating put on here just to protect it. As you can see, it's pretty damaged. But potentially a Viking skull. Pretty cool. And also, besides humans, I'm a dinosaur geek. So we have here, same company, Bone Clones. You can get dinosaur. We have a dinosaurs class. This is T-Rex, about a quarter scale. Not cheap. This is almost $500 skull. But shows you all the features of a real T-Rex skull that they scanned, and then they injected with this poly resin and they painted, and it's pretty neat. And here we see kind of a relative to Velociraptor, Deinonychus. You notice that bony orbit on the eye, just like an owl. Another feature that suggests dinosaurs may have come from, or birds may have come from dinosaurs. And then we got our little toe claw. So yeah, I wanted to show you this stuff, and then next I'm going to show you the, let me show you a few skeletons over here. Now these are real. So you can see here, we have these, they're all labeled for all the different types of parts of the bone. Like you see here, there's a tag indicating that this was a person, and there's an inventory of them. You know, this one's, some teeth have come out. It's sad when you see some of them deteriorate, because you know that there were people at one time. Here's another one. You can see the sternum and the pelvis. Now we look at the pelvis. That looks like a U shape to me, so I would say this is a female. And that's a V shape to me. I'd say that's a male. And in the prep room here, we have some more models. Here we have another real section of rib cage sternum. And here we actually have a real human brain in a jar. Lots of lovely stuff in the A&P lab. And then back here, our technician Ashley takes care of all our A&P labs. We see we have more human brains, more bones. And then here she has all her, for dissections, we have pig kidneys, sheep hearts, cow hearts, you name it, sheep eyes. And I think lastly we have here all our dissecting trays here. We have these weird lockers where we have skeletons hanging in them. So we have more skeletons here that we would put out for the classes. I'm going to show you now the animage table.